Many Christian denominations believe in rapture theory. They cite few specific Bible verses as the source of their belief. And today we want to examine those verses. We will also learn what does rapture means at all and what are they trying to prove with this theory. So, what is this rapture theory? As they say, they believe that prior to the time of the Great Tribulation, or approximately 7 years before the actual and visible return of Messiah to the earth, when he will resurrect the dead, God will one more time, but secretly, send Yeshua, who will not really come to earth, how they say he will not touch the earth, but supernaturally vacuum away all Christians into heaven. So we will learn that according to how those who believe in this theory teach, there will be not one, but two returns of Messiah. And not just two more returns, but they also teach that there are two covenant people, two destinies for people, and two plans of God for people. Of course, as we already learned what happens at the return of Messiah in our lecture series Entering into Life, we realize that this is nothing but fantasy, fiction, imagination, and invention of man. It is important to understand that this theory does not come from the Bible. Any ordinary Bible reader reading on his own would never come to conclude something like this, only if someone would impose this theory to him. Bible does not teach that people will suddenly disappear, their clothes will fall into the ground, planes, trains, and cars will be left without drivers, and this will cause disasters and confusion, etc. One would have to hear this from some televangelist or some teacher or reading it in a book, but never would find something like this while reading only the Bible. Unfortunately, many fell for this very destructive theory. Before jumping into biblical text, I would like to say a few words about where this theory came from. As we got used to from Protestants to blame Catholic Church and Jesuits for everything what goes wrong, in this case also, by searching, we can find these accusations. But this is not true. This theory neither is Catholic, neither Orthodox invention, but actually comes directly from Protestant community. It is interesting to notice that rapture theory was never taught, never preached, or argued about, or engaged in before the 19th century. This theory doesn't even exist in church history. Nobody ever believed that this is an accurate way to interpret the Bible. It is new, modern, and unique phenomenon. Here is the story. There was a young 15-year-old Scottish girl with charismatic and tongue-speaking background called Margaret MacDonald that, as she said, had a vision in which Lord showed to her that Christians will be exempt, removed from the times of tribulation. Of course, she shared this testimony in her church, after which her charismatic and Pentecostal pastor Edward Irving, when traveled to Ireland for prophecy conference, also promoted this vision of hers. There, at this conference, was also this guy called John Darby. He was a founder of a denomination called the Plymouth Brothers, and he was there to promote another theory invented by man called dispensationalism. So what he heard there from Irving was exactly what he needed in order to support his false theory. His theory was that God deals with people in different dispensations, different periods of time with different people. So, according to them, it was a period of time when God was dealing with Israel. But now God deals with church. And later, after the rapture of the church, according to them, he will again deal with Israel. Darby needed this theory, rapture theory, as a piece of a puzzle that he was missing to create this story where church will be removed from earth in order that God can again deal with Israel. For Darby and his denomination, the theory of rapture was a necessary doctrine that their system of dispensation can work at all. So this is how in Scotland, Ireland, and England they spread this theory about rapture of the church, which will, according to them, happen 7 years before Messiah comes. Also, Darby was the one who brought it to the United States, where he first came in contact with Dwight L. Moody, who was founder of the Moody Bible Institute and also Moody Publishers Press. Moody embraced those teachings and became a worldwide promoter of the rapture theory and also dispensationalism. Another event helped those theories to spread out. In 1920 was established Dallas Theology Institute, whose all directors were charismatic promoters of the dispensationalism and rapture theory. Maybe you heard about Timothy LaHaye and Jerry Jenkins that wrote novel series Left Behind, which was sold in millions of copies, even became New York Times bestseller, and which also led to making movies about. Most recent was Left Behind movie with main role of an actor, Nicolas Cage. Also, huge role in promoting these false beliefs had Darby's student, C.I. Scofield. He wrote very popular, maybe most popular until not long ago, Scofield Reference Bible, where he promoted this rapture theory. He was putting headings in the Bible text and study notes in the bottom, like Jesus predicted rapture. So the ordinary reader will take it for granted and think, look, it is in the Bible. It's there. Scofield Study Bible was very influential in modern history. And this is why this rapture theory was widely accepted. So this is how this theory came to be known. But let us talk about the specific Bible verses that they cite as a proof for this rapture or escape or disappearing theory. The first and the most cited verse comes from the first epistle that Paul wrote to Thessalonians. Let's read it. But I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep, that you sorrow not, even as others which have no hope. For if we believe that Yeshua died and arose again, even so them also which sleep in Yeshua will God bring with him. For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not prevent them which are asleep. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God. And the dead in Messiah shall arise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so shall we ever be with the Lord. So we need to understand the context of what we just read. Context is that some believers in Thessalonica were persecuted and murdered, and those that survived persecution were sad and asked Paul concerning those that were killed and died if they missed out the return of Messiah and what will happen to them. This is why Paul answers, "But I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep, that you sorrow not. For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not prevent them which are asleep." So Paul says, sorrow not. Don't worry about them, because they will actually have an advantage over us that will remain alive unto the coming of the Lord. Greek word used here for word coming is perusia. I will soon explain the Greek and Roman cultural meaning and understanding of this word. So Thessalonians are not asking about rapture here, but about the glorious coming of Messiah. And notice what Paul says, how this will happen. "For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God." As we see, Yeshua is coming with the shout, with the trump, says Paul. There is nothing secret here, right? So here is what happens while Messiah descends from heaven, and the dead in Messiah shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. Paul clearly says that those that are dead in Messiah shall rise first. So that will be resurrected first. Then second, we which are alive at his coming shall be caught up together with them, with resurrected in the clouds to meet Yeshua in the air. The Greek word here used for caught up is harpazo, and in Latin is rapturo. This is where the word rapture comes from. It is important to notice that there is no any kind of a secret here, and especially that this is not happening few years before Yeshua really comes as they twisted. This is the actual moment of his visible coming. This is the moment when he, with the sound of trumpet, descends from heaven and resurrects the dead. It is one and only time, and of course it is visible, that Messiah will return to save his elected people. This is the same moment that Paul spoke about to Corinthians when said, "In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed." It is the same event as in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, when the last trumpet will sound. This is the end. At the sound of the last trumpet, after the last one, there are no more trumpets. This cannot be something happening 7 years before Messiah will actually come, as they are trying to twist it. This is the moment when dead people will rise with incorruptible, glorified bodies. And those that remain alive at that time will change also. What means to change? Paul says, this corruptible body shall have put on incorruption, and this mortal shall have put on immortality. This is the moment when those that are dead will arise, and those that remain alive for his coming will be caught up. There is no prior catching up years before this one, as supporters of rapture says. Otherwise, how it would be possible at all that those alive get caught up after the dead rise first, if they are already in heaven years before, as they say? If they were taken to heaven secretly 7 years before that, how can they now, after the dead rose, be changed and caught up with the resurrected dead? It doesn't make sense, neither can be explained. There are no two returns of Messiah, only one, and at the last trumpet. And there is no secret here. It will be, for as the lightning comes out of the east and shines even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. It will be something worldwide known. Everyone will see it. Bible clearly states, behold, he comes with clouds, and every eye shall see him. Plainly, nothing secret will happen. So let's go back to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. I need to point a couple more things. So Paul said, and the dead in Messiah shall rise first, then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the cloud to meet the Lord in the air. It clearly says here that those alive that will be changed shall be caught up together with them in the clouds, with the resurrected ones, with those that rose from dead. And only then they will together meet Yeshua in the air. Obviously, this is the moment when the elected, so resurrected dead and those alive that changed, will be gathered together in order to meet Messiah. Bible plainly speaks of Yeshua while descending from heaven, sending angels to gather elected. Notice, for the Son of Man shall come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he shall reward every man according to his works. Or another one, and he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Or next one, Enoch, the seventh descendant from Adam, said this about these people. Look, the Lord is coming with thousands and thousands of his holy angels. And again, and to you who are troubled, rest with us, when the Lord Yeshua shall be revealed from heaven with his mighty angels. How obvious is what Bible says. Messiah is returning, descending from heaven with angels, not with previously vacuumed Christians who were for 7 years enjoying heavens, as rapture supporters claim. While descending, he will send his angels to gather all the resurrected and changed, his elected people, from one end of the earth to another, that they can meet him in the air. This is the first and only gathering with Messiah that will occur at all. It won't be any prior to this one. There is parable proving this. It is recorded in the book of Matthew, chapter 13, when Yeshua spoke about the good seed and tares. Messiah speaks of the harvest at the end of the age and says, "Let both grow together until the harvest. And in the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers." Verse 39 explains that the reapers are angels who are told to gather people at the day of harvest, which is the day of the glorious, visible return of Messiah. The good seed and the tares will grow together all the way to the harvest day. There is no first gathering of the good seed, and after 7 years, how they say, another harvest. There are no two different gatherings or harvest happening twice. There is no second coming of Messiah followed by the third coming. Please notice how plain Paul said to Thessalonians, "Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Yeshua Messiah, and by our gathering together unto him, that you be not soon shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter, as from us, as that the day of Messiah is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming." Paul clearly says to Thessalonians that the day of the coming of Messiah and the day of our gathering with him are one event, not two. It says, in that day, this day of the return of Messiah and our gathering with him will not come before the man of sin, Antichrist, is revealed and opposes and exalts himself above God, and that he as God sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. All this first has to happen, and only after this happens, let no man deceive you, Messiah will come back, and the man of sin shall be consumed with the spirit of his mouth, and Yeshua shall destroy him with the brightness of his coming. Here, for word coming, again is used perusia. Perusia means a literal arriving. Same as to say the train is arriving at the station. There is nothing secret there. It refers to the one and only visible arrival of Messiah, when he will gather us to meet him in the air. But grasp this. At the day of arrival of Messiah and gathering of the elected happens that Antichrist is destroyed. So how come, as the rapture supporters claim, they will be vacuumed and gathered with him in heaven even before Antichrist appears at all? Truly, this theory doesn't even make sense and has nothing to do with the scriptures. Also, Paul tells them that when Messiah comes, not in secret, but in flaming fire, taking vengeance, on that day he will give them rest and relief. So the rest and relief will not come earlier, secretly, as they teach, but when Yeshua comes in flaming fire with vengeance, when every eye will see him to destroy the enemy, which is his one and only return. There are no two comings, only one, the very visible one. Another thing, Prophet Daniel clearly says that he saw Antichrist killing saints before the return of Messiah. I beheld, and the same little horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them until the Ancient of the Days came. If saints are already vacuumed in heaven even before the little horn, Antichrist, appears at all, then how come Daniel says that there are saints on earth against whom Antichrist prevailed? This is what Yeshua meant when in Olivet discourse said, "So likewise you, when you shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors." And this phrase, "at the door," brings us to another thing I want to explain about the verse from 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. We saw that the verse says to meet the Lord in the air. Grasp this. Rapture to heaven does not exist in the Bible. No one will be taken to be with God. No one. Bible does not speak of this. I know that there are some verses in the book of Revelation where people in heaven are mentioned that might confuse you. And I will speak of those John's visions in next teachings. But what is most important now is to make a difference between being raptured, caught up to meet him in the air, and being raptured to heaven. There is no rapture in heaven, but clearly Paul says that we, resurrected and changed, will be caught up, harpazo, to meet Messiah in the air. This does not mean that we will be hanging with him in the air, neither that we will go back to heaven with him. Air and heaven are not equivalent words. Supporters of this rapture theory often use this verse to prove that this is actually the first of two Messiah's comings. They say that he will stay in the air and will not touch the earth. This is classic misuse of the Word of God and taking verse out of context. Grasp this. According to the Bible, as we learned in our series of teachings, neither Messiah's, neither our final destination is heaven. Prophet Zechariah very clearly described the day of the Lord, saying, "Behold, the day of the Lord comes, and his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east." So it is not true what they are trying to say. Messiah will, at his coming, surely stand in Jerusalem on his feet, wherefrom he will be ruling with saints over the whole earth for 1,000 years. And this is exactly what Paul is trying to explain to Thessalonians. He is using this imagery of the royal return of the king to his city. He presents them a picture of resurrected and changed saints together going to meet him in the air on his way down, his return to his city. They are like a greeting committee. They are part of his royal procession and royal entourage, with Messiah coming back to earth where they will reign with him. All the cities surrounded by walls have the same protocol. When the watchman standing on the wall hears the trumpets and horses coming on the road, he asks, "Who's coming?" Right? Stand and identify. King David gave us exactly this description in Psalm 24. Notice this. "Lift up your heads, O you gates, and be you lift up, you everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O you gates, even lift them up, you everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory. This is the protocol. So once they knew it is King whose trumpets are blowing and it is King who is on the road, they don't just stand and wait. They actually send out greeting committee to meet him on the road. And the Greek word Paul uses here to meet is apostasis, which actually culturally literally meant to meet or to welcome emperor returning from the road. This is exactly what is happening. And where do they go from there when they meet and welcome him? They are not going back on the road, right? They are coming into the city. Same thing will happen at his coming. When Messiah descends from heaven, resurrected and changed saints together will meet him in the air and return with him on earth into his city. So it is not a story about the rapture to heaven, how they are trying to twist it. It is the clear story about the people rising from the dead and meeting their King on his return to earth, where he is about to enter through the door, the city gate, and reign with them. Bible always says the same story. If you remember the parable that Yeshua spoke about the nobleman going to a far country to receive the kingdom and to come back to rule, we find it is the same story. The same thing Prophet Daniel meant when wrote in his book, until the Ancient of the Days came and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. And the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Also, Paul clearly says that the moment of the appearing, Greek word epiphania, appearing of Messiah, is also the moment of the establishment of the kingdom. These are not and cannot be two different events. Notice, I charge you therefore before God and the Lord, Yeshua Messiah, who shall judge the living and the dead at his appearing and his kingdom. Paul doesn't say that he will appear once to take Christians and after 7 years he will come back again to establish the kingdom. It is so obvious that this is one and the same event when he will come to resurrect and redeem his people. He will come only one more time. Second time. Paul clearly said this to Hebrews. So Messiah was once offered to bear the sins of many, and unto them that look for him shall he appear the second time without sin unto salvation. So Messiah came first time to bear our sins and die, and will come second time to resurrect us, to save us. Obviously, Paul understood that here there is no third time. Also, Peter understood this clearly. On Pentecost, speaking of Messiah, said, whom the heaven must receive until the times of restitution of all things. Peter says that Yeshua will be in heaven until he returns to restore the earth, all the things. This is his second coming, not third as rapture supporters claim. Also, to Apostle John in the book of Revelation was revealed that the marriage supper of the Lamb occurs at his visible coming, not 7 years earlier. I mentioned Olivet discourse also, so let me touch on this. This is also another example where supporters of rapture are trying to make one verse out of context in order to prove their false belief. We know that the context of the 24th chapter of Matthew is about the last days. And Messiah speaks plain about the great tribulation that will come upon people, which he describes it in verses 15 to 28. And then clearly in verse 29 says, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. This is so easy to understand what it says. First, he announces tribulation, and then says, immediately after the tribulation shall appear the sign of a Son of Man, and they shall see the Son of Man coming on the clouds. And he shall send his angel to gather together his elect from one end to another. So this cannot be description of secret rapture. Verse 27 told us, for as the lightning comes out of the east and shines even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Everyone will know, and for sure this is not happening before the tribulation as rapture supporters teach. It clearly says that he will send angels to gather elected immediately after the tribulation. So if elected were vacuumed to heaven before tribulation, as they say, who are now those elected that will be gathered after the tribulation? And also another proof that they are taking verses out of context. Verse 22 says, and except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the sake of elects, those days shall be shortened. So it clearly says, for the elect's sake, those days of tribulation will be shortened. If elect are already in heaven, as rapture supporters claim, why would God shorten those days for elect's sake? It is clear that the elect ones are still on earth while tribulation is going on. Do not let anyone deceive you. Also, rapture supporters try to make verse 30, which says, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, as a different event than the verse 37 that says, but as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. In both these verses, for word coming is used the same word, perusia, which has a literal meaning for a visible coming. What the verse actually even says, they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and a great glory. There is nothing secret here. It is visible. They see him. And those are not two separate events, as they say, one not visible and the other one visible. But they are one and the same, which will happen immediately after the tribulation. Let me summarize those verses that they use to prove their false teachings. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 clearly says that those that will remain alive for the coming of Messiah will be changed after dead are resurrected. So there is no prior rapture of the living, since they will be still there while resurrection is happening. Also, 1 Corinthians chapter 15 confirms this and says that at the last trumpet, the dead will arise, and then those alive will be changed. So again, there is no rapture of the living prior resurrection of the dead. Also, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 told us not to let anyone deceive us, because the day of the coming of the Lord and our gathering with him are one and the same event, and it will not occur until the man of the sin is revealed, son of perdition, who will oppose and exalt himself above God, who will sit on the temple, showing himself that he is God, and who Messiah will destroy with the brightness of his coming. So, rapture of the living cannot occur before all this happen. And Matthew 24 already really clearly says that gathering with Yeshua will happen immediately after the tribulation, not years before, as rapture supporters claim. At the end, we can easily conclude that rapture theory is not in the Bible. It was invented in someone's head, and our enemy, Satan, used it as an advantage to deceive people, making them think that they will escape the tribulation, that they will be taken away, vacuumed to heaven before these times of trouble starts. On the other side, Yeshua, the Messiah, never preached this escaping or disappearance. In fact, opposite. Notice his words. I pray not that you should take them out of the world, but that you should keep them from the evil. Messiah did not pray that we are taken out of the world. Yeshua was also proclaiming that in last days, gospel about the kingdom will be preached all over the world. And because of it, we will be persecuted and killed. So I would ask rapture supporters, if in those days, church, the body of Messiah, is vacuumed in heaven, then who will be those to bear the gospel message? Also, it comes to my mind to mention chapter 12 in Revelation, where dragon, Satan, and his angels are cast out of heaven. And he knows that he has short time, actually 1260 days or 3.5 years. So what he does? He persecutes the woman, which represents those which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Yeshua, Messiah. So again, if the body of Messiah is vacuumed already before these tribulation days, then why Bible says that those which keep God's commandments and have testimony of Yeshua are still on earth. Messiah never proclaimed escaping the tribulation. He always preached that we will actually have tribulations. Notice, in the world you shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. He always preached engagement and endurance in sufferings. Yeshua actually emphasized the unprecedented martyrdom in the generation of his return. Notice what he said. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. Yeshua never promised exemption of persecutions. Instead, that it will happen to us, same what happened to him. Notice, remember the word that I said unto you. The servant is not greater than his Lord. If they have persecuted me, they will also persecute you. Paul also preached the same thing, that we must through much tribulation enter into the kingdom of God. Paul also says that tribulation actually helps building character. Rejoice in hope of the glory of God. And not only so, but we glory in tribulations also, knowing that tribulation works patience, and patience experience, and experience hope. Also later in epistle written to Romans, notice how Paul encourages believers. Who shall separate us from the love of Messiah? Shall tribulation, or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or peril, or sword? Tribulation is first on the list. For some, there will be protection in different ways, but no one will be taken to heaven. John says that the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. So Bible clearly says that in this period of time, last 3.5 years, that Satan himself will be cast down to earth, there will be some protection for those that keep the commandments of God and have testimony of Yeshua. This is nothing new, nothing that never happened before. Remember how God protected people of Israel while sending plagues on Egypt. He didn't take them to heaven, but provided protection in there. Or do you remember how God protected Noah and his family when sending the flood on earth? He didn't take them to heaven, but he provided protection on earth, even though all the earth was covered with water. Or do you remember when Prophet Daniel and the 3 of his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were cast into the burning furnace? They were not taken to heaven, but God provided protection in the fire. This is the way how God protects his people, by providing exit in the midst of the trouble, not by pulling them out of the trouble. So how and when will God save his people from this trouble? Bible plainly speaks that salvation will come at the end of the great tribulation, when they shall look upon him whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only son. Our prayer is that the truth of the Bible and the Spirit of God prepares your character for endurance, not escaping or disappearance, that you may be ready for what is coming. May Jehovah bless you all.